So today I'm going to show you how you can make this really cool rig in Blender. And you move this control around and look at that, it's rotating. Let's just go into this view, you can see it better. Look at that. And if you move the root bone, you can move the root bone round. If you move the head, look at that, it stays to the body. Wow. If you rotate it, you can rotate the head. And we also have an eye control bone for the little dot in the eye. And you can move this around. You can scale it up and scale it down. Great. So let's just see that again, because it's amazing. Wow. Check it out. It's rotating correctly. So, you know, if you want to learn rigging, stick around. We're going to go through it step by step. And this is an advanced tutorial, so hopefully you're familiar with some rigging constraints and things like this in Blender. If you are completely lost, I recommend starting with something basic, and there's plenty of tutorials out there. But if you're getting into rigging, or you're intermediate and you want to push yourself to try something new, come along for the ride. I'll see you in the next part. So let's make a start. I've separated this BB8 model into two parts, the body and the head. This is important because we're going to be using a Python script to control the rotation of the bone that moves the body, whereas the head is going to stay on top. And for this to work, we need the dimensions of the body, and the dimensions are found here. So this is important because we're going to input this into the Python script, which I've already pre-prepared. So you don't need to write any Python script. You can just copy and paste it when we get to that stage. So let's go. First thing we want to do is add in an armature. So Shift A, single bone, and we're going to just put these in front so that we can see the bones. So if we go into the running man, viewport display, and click in front. We're also going to turn on the axes as well while we're here, so that we can see the axes. Okay, so let's go to the side view. Make sure that your pivot point is set to individual origins, and that your orientation mode is set to normal. And let's go into edit mode by pressing tab. Select the bone. We're going to rename this root, and then we're going to rotate this on the X by -90, and we'll just scale it down a little bit so that when we make a circle for the shape, it's just a little bit bigger than the body. Let's duplicate this. Let's move it up on the Z, and we'll call this body. We want to make sure that this bone is dead center in the body. First of all, we'll just scale it down a little bit so it's just a little bit bigger than the radius of the body, so it just sticks out here, so that when we add a shape in, it's just over the top of the body. Great. Back into object mode, select the body. Alt Z will turn on the X-ray mode. If you press 1, it will go to the vertex selection mode. And we just want to box select these two center vertices, and we'll put the cursor to selected. If you have a different sphere and you don't have this point, you can actually just select everything with A. Make sure your pivot point is set to bounding box center, and then you can Shift S and put the cursor to selected, and that will also put it in the center of the bounding box shape, dead center. Great. Click on the armature, back into edit mode, Shift S and selection to cursor. Now let's get one for the head. So Shift D, move it up on the Z, and we'll put it up near the top there so that it's aligned with the top of the body. And we'll scale it down a bit more as well. Make sure you're on individual origins, scale it down. We'll rename this head. So this body wants to be parented to the root, so selecting the body, shift selecting the root so the root is active, Control P and keep offset. But we don't want to do the same here, because if we parent this to this and then we try and rotate this, you'll see that the head moves with it, and we don't want that. That's not how BB8 moves. So the best thing to do is to have a parent helper bone, which we're going to call a mechanism bone. And mechanism bones generally in Blender have a prefix of MCH, capitals with a hyphen, and because it's for the head, we're going to rename it mech head. And we'll parent this to the mech head. Great. Let's go and add some constraints first. We want the head to stick to the surface of the body. So we can do this with the limit distance constraint. If you want to add a constraint in pose mode, you select the target bone, which will be this one, and then shift select the bone you want to add a constraint to, and then press shift, control and C, and it will bring up the constraints menu. And first of all, we want to add a limit distance, and in the constraint bone tab, the bone constraints tab, we want to set the region to be on surface, so it can't move away or it can't move inside. And if we try and move this now, you'll see that that is a perfect circle. Great. But we also want to align it to the surface. So one way to do that is to use a damp track constraint. So again, shift select the target bone, and then click the target bone, shift select the constrained bone, shift control C, and then choose damp track, and it's going to point to the bone. So now when we move it, you can see that it's conforming. Brilliant. But if we tab in and out of edit mode, you'll see that it's changing. And if we try and parent the head to this bone, it's also going to flip as well. So we want this to be the default rest position. So make sure you're in edit mode. We'll extrude out, and then in pose mode, you can select the extruded bone with Shift S and cursor to selected, back into edit mode, and then we can Shift S and put the selection to cursor. Then we can delete this bone, and now it's pointing the right way. Brilliant. We want to do the same for the eye. Here I've added an empty to the eye because you can reference objects in the shader. So if we go to the shader editor, you can see that if we go to object mode and come over here, we can see that the texture coordinate node is using the object coordinates, and it's referencing the object mech eye, which is this empty here. And I use this for the red dot. So if we go into rendered view and we move the red dot around, you can see that that actually has a little line. We can scale it up and down, and that looks it's, you know, it's functional, it's good enough. And I think we want to just scale it down a little bit, because that's actually the normal size of the eye, something like that. Great. So let's go back into the viewport view, and we'll duplicate this bone in edit mode, and we want to put the cursor here and then put the bone to the cursor, and we're going to also extrude this bone out here, because we're also going to do the same as this. And we'll change, if we're going to pose mode, we can change the actually the best thing to do is delete this one. Let's just delete them all, and then we'll put a limit distance, because the limit distance will automatically put the distance in. Alright, and then a damp track as well. Great. And let's just put the cursor here, selection to cursor, delete the bone, and then we'll just scale this bone down a little bit like that. Okay, great. And then we'll parent this bone to this one. So now we've got the eye bone, and we're ready to start skinning the mesh to the rig. One thing I'd like to do though, first of all we need to add a deform bone. So what we're going to do is just select all of these bones. These two are actually going to be deform bones, as well as control bones. So if we go to the bone properties and press Alt and left click on the deform, it will turn off deform for all of the bones. And it's just good practice to do that. Great. Let's duplicate this bone, let's scale it down a bit. And this is going to be a deform bone, so I actually want to name it with capital def hyphen def body. Great. And let's add some more constraints on here. So what I want to do is make sure that this bone is copying the location and is copying the scale of the body bone here. And then we want to also copy these constraints onto the deform bone. And if you have the copy attributes add-on activated, you can just press Ctrl C, copy selected constraints, and there you are. And we can also add in a copy rotation on the mech head bone, so that if we do want the head to rotate with the body, we can create a slider to turn that on and off. So let's do that. So we'll copy the rotation, and we're going to add a custom property on this bone. So make sure you're in pose mode, go down to the bottom of the bone properties tab, and here you'll see custom properties. Just click new, go on the cog item to edit it, and then we'll say follow rotation. Make sure it's library overridable so that we can use it if you link the rig into another file, and click OK, and then right click on the value and then copy as new driver, and then in the constraint you can paste the driver on the influence, and we'll just move it up so that the copy location, the copy rotation, the copy scale are in the right order. Great. So we want to set the default value to be 0, because normally we don't want the head to follow the rotation of the body bone. Okay, and we'll also, you'll see that the custom property also appears here, which is really useful for the animator, just to be able to animate straight from here, right underneath here, and it's got the custom property here. It's great. Okay, so if we rotate this bone now, you'll see that the head does not rotate with the body, but if we up the slider, you'll see that it's now following the rotation. Great. So let's skin the meshes to the rig now. So we'll just clear the rotation. If we go to edit mode, you can select everything with A, Control G, and assign to new group. Now I've already added the deform bones here, so I'm just going to remove those on each of these, just to show you. And then what we do, we just rename the group to be the name of the bone. In this case it's def body. Let's do the same with the head. So again, A to select everything, Control G, assign to new group, and we'll name this one head. If we select both the meshes now and then shift select the armature, press Control P and choose armature deform, not automatic weights but armature deform, because we've already added the weights. So that's great. So now if we just deselect everything, and then we can move this, you can see that that moves. But the deform bone is not moving. So that is probably because deform is checked off. So you can see actually why deform is important. And there we go. Great. Next, we need to control the rotation of the deaf bone using the location of this. And this is best done with a Python script. If you try and do it with constraints, it's a rotational mess and it won't behave properly. This is a common problem with this type of rig. But using this solution, you can actually use Python to properly rotate this based on this bone's world location. So let's click New in the text editor. This is the text editor here. Click New, and I'll provide this script for you so that you can copy and paste this into your own file if you want to try this. I'm just going to go over to my other files, something I prepared earlier, and then I'm going to copy this, paste it in here, and depending on how you've named yours, you probably want to make sure the names are all properly named. So the name of the rig is Armature here, but when I tested this earlier, I renamed the rig to be this, and I like this name. I might actually use this name. So let's just name this. Make sure it's the same. You can copy and paste, but I know the name very well, so I have my own naming convention. And so I think that's correct. I'm just going to make sure that's correct by pasting it in here, and make sure the name of the bone is also the same. So you can click on the bone, press F2 to rename, and you'll see that the text is already highlighted, so you can just press Ctrl C and paste it in there. Make sure the body is also the same name. So here we've got BB8 hyphen body, whereas here this is BB8 with a hyphen here, a space, and a capital B. So you want to make sure that the names are exactly the same. So let's do the same. Press F2, copy, right click to exit the rename, and paste it in there. Okay, so you might say, oh well, Mark, what if we run the script now? Will it work? So if we run the script and we try and move it, nothing's happening. That's because we need some drivers. So we need some drivers on the rotation on each of the 4 axes of the quaternion and the 4 values of the quaternion rotation here. And this one is in Python, in Blender Python. This is like a list of 4, and lists always start from 0. So this one is a value of 0 in the list. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. So we want to add a driver, delete the variable, and then we want to get the name of this. So let's copy the name. Let's edit the driver. We'll paste this in because this is the name of the function. Actually, it's the function name, and you'll see that there's parentheses, so we need to open parentheses and then put an integer value, and the integer value for W on the quaternion will be 0. If we press enter, it should work, and there we go. It'll tell you it's a slow Python expression, and that's fine. Don't worry about that. It's just a Blender kind of disclaimer, because it's a function that Blender doesn't recognize by default. It's not built in Blender. We've created it. So it gives this slow Python expression as a sort of be careful disclaimer. Okay, so let's do the same. We'll just right click, copy driver, and then we'll just paste the driver in all of the other values. But we need to edit each value. So this one will be 1. You see the values change. This one will be 2 for the Y. And this one is 3 for the Z. Something happened. So let's see if it's working now. Ah, I see, it's working there. Great. That's working that way. And that's working that way. But you might notice it's very easy, unless you constrain it on an axis, to go through the floor. And perhaps, you know, that's not really something we want to allow. You know, you want to be able to just rag this control around without having to strain it on an axis. So what you can do, because it's aligned to world axes, Z up, X plus, Y plus, it coincides with this. We can actually just go to the Z and lock it. So now you can just move this around and you'll see that this moves. And look, my empty is not moving. That's something we need to fix. Let's select the bone. Let's shift and left click and drag over the empty, and then we'll just press Control P and we'll parent that to the bone, and that should now move with the rest of it. Great. Brilliant. Let's tidy things up. In the armature properties, you've got all of these layers. Now, these are this layer we want to keep for the controls, or I like to keep this for the controls. You can put it wherever you want. But this bone we're never going to control, and this deformed bone is something we want to not let anyone access. So we're going to move these into a different layer. And that's it. Out of sight, out of mind, but they still work. Great. Now let's make this rig look a little bit nice, because you know, there's just bone shapes. It's not very nice. So come on, what's going on here? So let's add in some custom bone shapes. So this is the fun part here. We can do a bit of modeling. Let's add in a circle. Make sure we're bounding box center as the pivot and global for the orientation. So we'll box select the centers. We'll scale them out a little bit to get a point, so that the animator can see which way it's rotated and which way it's moving. And then, oh, actually, let's undo that. Maybe we can make it a little bit sci-fi. So let's bevel this and press V straight after the bevel to bevel the vertices. And you can create this little flat edge. Looks a little bit more sci-fi. And let's decorate this a little bit more. Oh yes, I like that. That's great. So that's looking very sci-fi. Let's make one for the body. It's similar. Hey, I like that. That looks great. So let's add these in. So, should we just rename this so we can find them? So this is circle 1. I think this is the widget body. And I think this one is the widget root. Great. This one, the other two, I think we'll just add in a normal circle. Let's keep the time down a bit. And then we'll just call this widget circle, because it has multiple users. Now, let's add these in. So, under bone properties, custom shape, type in widget, root, and then here, widget body. You see these are perfectly sized. And we'll select both of these. We'll press widget. We'll hold down Alt and select the last one here, and you can see that this is not rotated correctly. So we can go into edit mode on the widget circle. Let's make sure on global, rotate X 90. oops, rotate X90. And there we go, perfect. So you can actually change the transforms of the custom shape, which does nothing for the bone, but it helps the visualization at least. Great. And we're going to hide the mech layer. Let's move the rig into the character collection so that it comes with it. And let's select all the widgets shapes and move them into a new collection called widgets BB8. And let's turn off the visibility, toggle it off. It's completely disabled, and then we'll just put this in here, and hey, we're almost done. So one thing we need to do is that when you link in a rig, you'll have to also append or link in or load in or open the text file to have this rig run, and we don't want to do that. We want to have it come along for the ride when you import it into a file. So there's another little text file that we need to create to link this, and we create a custom property that links the Python script. So let's just name our script first to something reasonable. Let's call it rig functions dot py. We'll keep it functions because you might want to add other functions in there. Who knows? Yep. Okay, and then we'll go back to the other text, empty text file that we created, and we'll just type in import bpy, and then we'll say rig equals bpy dot data dot objects, and I've created 2 dots here, be careful, and then we're just going to type in the rig names, rig BB8 underscore version 1. And I like to use a hyphen for my versioning so that it blended auto numerical, whatever it does. It doesn't ruin this. It just creates a 1 or a 2 at the end of it there. So great. Now we're going to add a custom property. So we're just going to rig, and to create a custom property, you actually just open a square brackets. We'll say rig functionality. Let's call it that. Okay, that's the name of our custom property. And then we'll say equals the text file. So we're going to go bpy.data.text with texts. And then we'll open the square brackets. And what was the name of the text? It was rig functions, and I've spelt it incorrectly. You should just copy the name really, but we'll manage, and I think that should work. So now if we let's just show you down here, look, there's no custom property right now. If we run the script, there it is, rig functionality with the rig functions py file. Great. So now you can discard of this file. You don't need it anymore. We'll just unlink it. You don't need to. You can keep it there. Whatever. So let's add them into little bone groups. So little bone groups here. We'll just create a purple one. Let's make it look nice. The body. And I was going by colour, and then I decided to go by bone, but it's alright. It's fine. So let's do this to create a custom color set. Let's make the saturation really high and the value so we can see it. Paste it, drop the saturation down, and then I like to have this nice blue color for when it's active. So we'll assign this root bone to that, and then here we'll assign this to this one. Let's choose a yellow one, custom color set. Let's drop, or let's up the green. Let's make it more yellow, and then we'll copy paste this one. Drop the saturation. Drop the saturation, and then nice blue color. And then this one. Did we assign it? And then the green one will be the other two. So here we go. We'll assign these. Make these this color. That green will do. We'll pop this in there, and then we'll make it a nice blue color. Brill. Great. And that's the rig. Nice and simple. Actually, it's quite complex, but I hope I've made it simple. And that's it. There we go.